Greetings and welcome, friends! I'm Ash, and today I would like to talk to you about Warhammer 40k Darktide, which, much like its predecessor Vermintide 2, is a remarkably challenging co-op game. Getting good at it requires mastering both melee and ranged combat, calmly prioritizing dangerous enemies in huge crowds and really tense situations, as well as quickly adjusting to whatever curveball the AI director decides to send your way. And all of this only gets more and more complicated the higher you ramp up the difficulty setting. Yet despite how hard things can become, Darktide is also a remarkably enjoyable game to mess around with, and one that I've already spent 50 hours on and it hasn't even launched yet. So if you're thinking about diving in yourself, allow me to give you some handy tips and advice to make those first few missions go by as smoothly as possible. Without further ado, let us begin. Every single character in Darktide wields a melee weapon, so do make sure to actually use it. It doesn't even matter if you're a ranged-focused sharpshooter or a psyker, sooner or later enemies are going to swarm you and you are going to need to defend yourself. Trying to do so with a ranged weapon will generally result in you taking a large chunk of damage, since most ranged weapons not only have worse dodging capabilities than their melee counterparts, but they also tend to be a lot worse at clearing out hordes when they're spread out all around you. So even if your calling in life is to snipe specials from 2 kilometers away, do be prepared to whip out your melee weapon at a moment's notice. This really will save your life. In order to stay alive in melee combat, and especially on the harder difficulty settings, you'll need to master what I like to call the safety dance. The key thing here is managing the amount of enemies that are capable of attacking you at any given time, because if you can do that reliably, you can be perfectly safe even when surrounded by a gigantic horde. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually quite simple to execute, though it is a bit tricky to master. The basic gist of it is that you want to weave together attacks, dodges, and push attacks so you keep the enemies confused due to your movement, dazed from your pushes, or stunned from your attacks. If you do this correctly, you'll end up in a situation where every single enemy around you is too enthralled with your performance to even consider taking a swing at your face. Ideally, you want to do all of this while moving in a sort of circular motion around a horde so you never give the enemy time to surround you. But this sort of concept also works if you're completely pinned down. The safety dance does take a fair bit of practice to nail down, however, so just keep combining attacks, dodges, and push attacks until you finally find a rhythm that suits you and the weapon you're using. Given the sheer amount of enemies you have to face off against in Darktide, you're frequently going to find yourself in situations where your only option for survival is to run away. However, trying to simply sprint out of a group of enemies is a death sentence, as the melee ones will be able to catch up with you with ease, while the ranged ones will be quite happy to just shoot you in the back. Instead, you once again need to rely on the safety dance to save the day. Rather than sprinting in the opposite direction and hoping for the best, your best bet is to dodge backwards and sidewards while fighting off any opponents that are still chasing you. Then, once the coast is clear and you're not in immediate danger, then you can break into a sprint to gain distance. While this whole procedure is far slower than simply sprinting from the very start, it is also a far more reliable and far more safe one, since most enemies, including the ranged ones, simply won't be able to land a hit on you due to all of the dodging around. Regardless if you're fighting in melee or shooting at the enemies from afar, getting too focused on your target and ignoring the world around you is a very, very bad idea. I say this because once you get comfortable with the gameplay, the regular progression through a map in Darktide should present you with very little challenge. Instead, it is the random events like hordes, specials, and bosses that will often throw everything into chaos and spell your doom. So if you can keep an eye and ear open for these types of threats while blasting apart Nurgle cultists, you will dramatically increase your win percentage. For example, if a Rager arrives as a part of a horde and your team doesn't notice him, it is entirely possible that he'll either down someone or seriously wound someone before being taken out. So if you can kill the Rager yourself, or even simply mark them for your specialists to dispose, you can very easily prevent a lot of unnecessary damage from happening in the first place. Repeat this sort of thing a few dozen times throughout the mission, and it is very easy to see just how much of a positive impact you can have on your team. Unless you've got a group of friends that like to run things their own way, a good Darktide team should always have a character focused on dealing with specials and elites, a character good at grappling with hordes, and ideally someone to help plug any gaps and resurrect any fallen players before things get really out of hand. These are by no means rigorous roles, and most players will fall somewhere in between, but having all three of these bases covered will definitely make things easier for everyone involved. So if you want to make the push into higher difficulties, try to orient yourself towards one of these playstyles by choosing appropriate loadouts and traits for your class. The exact weapon and trait combination doesn't really matter here, since you can grease even the goofiest of builds with a bit of skill, but just make sure that your character is actually good at something. It can be anything, but just be good at something. Due to the random nature of Darktide's matchmaking, you're frequently going to be stuck in missions where one or even multiple members of your team are not doing their job. You can either lose your mind over this and eventually the mission as well, or you can rise to the occasion and pick up the slack. So if your zealots are happily role-playing sharpshooters while letting horde upon horde wash over your team, take it upon yourself to be the frontliner. Even if your build isn't the best at it, having someone, anyone, hold the ravenous tides back can easily be the difference between a close victory and a humiliating defeat. The same goes for every other scenario, because even though you can't control what your team is going to do, you can definitely work around them and establish at least some kind of strategy for everyone to rally around. As I've come to learn throughout my 50+ hours with Darktide, a lot of players would prefer to fight infinite waves of enemies over simply completing the objective and finishing the mission. Because of this, I would highly recommend taking the initiative yourself and focusing on the objectives whenever possible. Naturally, stick with your team if they're moving in the right sort of direction, and help them out whenever possible. But if they simply aren't doing anything and are just stuck fighting hordes forever, your best bet is to break away and get the things done yourself. Most mission objectives can be handled solo, and while it is neither recommended nor wise to do so, pushing things along yourself can, in a pinch, save your entire run, so do keep that at the back of your mind. Regardless of what sort of weapons you're using, you'll want to keep upgrading them every couple of missions. Higher level items not only bring with them better stats, but higher rarity items also come with extremely handy special effects that can sometimes drastically increase the amount of damage you can do. So if you want to have an easier time in your current difficulty, or even move on to a higher one, make sure to buy the strongest gear you possibly can. Don't take this to an extreme, however, as a couple of points here and there won't make or break your run. A weapon you enjoy that's a few levels lower than a weapon you hate is a perfectly valid option despite its supposedly lower damage. Just make sure not to fall too far behind the curve and you should be perfectly fine. As far as weapon upgrading is concerned, I would recommend waiting with that until you reach max level. Most of the weapons you'll use during the leveling process will only be with you for a couple of hours, so it makes no sense to spend a considerable amount of resources on getting them stronger, when you can instead save those resources and eventually use them to perfect your endgame build that will quote-unquote last forever. As you might guess just by looking at them, enemies in Darktide have different types of armor which offer different types of protection. You don't need to understand the exact numbers and formulas behind each armor type. It really isn't worth the trouble, but what you do need to know is that the tougher an enemy is, the more power you need to put into an attack in order to bring them down. For example, if you try to use light melee attacks and a pistol against the heavily armored crushers, you're not really going to achieve anything at all, as your shots will simply bounce off. Meanwhile, if you use heavy melee attacks from an axe aimed against the enemy's head, or shoot at them with a high caliber weapon like the bolter, you'll be able to chew through their health regardless of their armor. Knowing which weapon is good at what will come to you with time, though you can speed up the process by going into the training area and messing around with your favorites. Either way, the main takeaway here is to avoid using light or weak attacks against armored enemies. Instead, focus on hitting them in the head, using heavy melee attacks whenever possible, and if all else fails, see if you can help the specialized anti-elite members of your team take them out by giving them a clear line of sight, tagging the enemy, or just killing any hordes that might be around. And there you have it, 9 simple tips that will hopefully make your first experience with Darktide a nice and pleasant one, despite all the Nurgle corruption stinking up the place. That said, this is still a remarkably challenging game we're talking about, so don't be too surprised if you end up kissing the floor over and over again in your first few missions. I've spent around 600 hours in Vermintide 2, so I am by no means a newbie, and even I've met the Emperor more times than I can count. Getting good at Darktide is not going to be a quick and easy process, but as long as you roll with the punches and keep pushing onward, you'll definitely get there in the end. And until then, well, you'll at least be able to take out your frustrations with the business end of a chainsword. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you would like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, fetch your zealot, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you again for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Bye bye!